There is a specific kind of loneliness that has nothing to do with being alone. It is the loneliness of being in a room with someone who will not see you. Not because they are cruel. Not because they are cruel. Because something in them, something private and heavy and pre-existing, has made the seeing too difficult to do. Children do not know this. Children think, I am not enough. If I were enough, they would look. I thought this for 23 years. On the day my father died, I found out what he had actually been looking at. My name is Simone Alcott. I am 26 years old. For the entirety of my childhood and most of my adult life, my father was a man who was present in the house and absent from the room. He came to dinners and sat at the table and answered questions and attended the events he was required to attend. But there was a pane of glass between him and everything, between him and my mother, between him and my sister. Most completely, most specifically, most consistently, between him and me. I spent 23 years pressing my hand against that glass, trying to understand if the problem was him or if the problem was me. The day he died, I found out it was neither. Before I take you into any of it, hit like and subscribe. It means more than I know how to say. Drop your city and your time in the comments. I read every single one. Let me take you back. All the way back. Part 1. The distance. My father's name was Walter Alcott. He was 58 when he died, which is too young. It is too young in the plain factual sense that 58 is a number with decades still in it. And it is too young in the specific sense that there are things I needed from him that I did not get, and will not now get, and 58 left no time to go back and get them. He was an archivist. He worked for a university library for 30 years, cataloging and preserving historical documents. He spent his days in a temperature-controlled room with things that were fragile and needed careful handling. He was good at it. He was, by every account from his colleagues that I have heard since his death, exceptional at it. Patient, precise, capable of a quality of attention that historical documents require and that most people cannot sustain. He could not sustain it at home. At home, he was distracted. At home, he was elsewhere. Not in any dramatic way, he was not volatile or cruel or frightening. He was simply not quite present. His eyes moved to a middle distance when conversations went on too long. His answers were brief and slightly delayed, like a broadcast with a half-second lag. He sat in his chair in the evenings with a book in his hands, and the pages did not always turn. My mother, Claire, managed this the way she managed most things, with a cheerful competence that never fully acknowledged what it was managing. She was the volume in our house. She filled the space my father did not fill. She was at every school event, every recital, every Saturday activity, present with an attention that compensated for the attention that was elsewhere. I understood from an early age that this compensation was effortful. I did not know what it was compensating for. My sister Bea is 4 years younger than me. She had our mother's quality. Bright, social, easily present in a room. She and my father had a relationship I can only describe as comfortable distance. They did not clash. They did not connect deeply. They existed in the same house with a mutual pleasant neutrality that required nothing of either of them. With me, it was different. With me, it was not neutral. With me, there was something active in his distance, something that had the quality of an effort. As if maintaining the distance from me required more energy than maintaining it from everyone else. As if I, specifically, was the thing he was working hardest not to look at directly. Children notice these things. They do not have language for them. They have the feeling of them, which lives in the body without a name, which becomes part of the texture of childhood, which shapes what you believe about yourself before you have the tools to examine what you believe. What I believed, I was difficult. I was too much. I was, in some way I could not identify, the problem. I carried this into adolescence and into adulthood, and into a therapist's office when I was 20, and into every relationship I attempted, where I was certain, at some cellular level, that I was too much and would eventually be turned away from. I am telling you this because the discovery I made on the day my father died did not erase this. It explained it, which is a different thing, and the explaining helped. which is also a different thing from erasing. I want to be precise about what truth does and what it doesn't do, because I have seen this kind of story told as if the truth is a solvent that dissolves the damage, and it is not that. The damage is still there. The truth just tells you it was never your fault, which allows you to stop spending your energy on the wrong question. The wrong question was, what is wrong with me? The right question took 23 years to arrive. Part 2. Growing up in the glass. The moments I remember most precisely are not the bad ones. There were no bad ones, not in the way that word usually means. What I remember are the almost moments. The moments when the glass thinned. I was 7. I had a school project, a family tree, the kind teachers assign without thinking about what family trees actually contain. I brought it to my father because it required information I didn't have, names of grandparents, places, dates. He sat at the kitchen table with me and answered the questions. All of them. Patiently, precisely, the way he catalogued documents. Every name spelled correctly. Every date confirmed. At the end, when I had everything I needed, I said, "Dad, who do I look like?" He looked at me. Not the middle distance. Me. For about 3 seconds he looked at me directly and something in his face shifted. Not into warmth exactly, into a kind of intensity. Like a shutter opening. He said, "You look like," and stopped. The shutter closed. He said, "You have your mother's eyes." He stood up and left the room. I was 7. I wrote Mom's eyes on my family tree and did not think about it again for 16 years. I was 11. A recital. I played the violin badly but committedly, the way 11-year-olds play things. Afterward, in the parking lot, my mother hugged me, and Bea hugged me, and my father put his hand on my shoulder briefly, and said, "Good effort, Simone." My mother said, "She was wonderful, Walt." He said, "Yes." He walked to the car. I was 14. A bad day at school, the specific social catastrophe of 14. A group of girls and a comment and the long hallway after. I came home and went to the kitchen and my father was already there. Unusual, a Tuesday afternoon when he was rarely home before 6. He looked at my face. He said, "Hard day?" I said yes. He said, "I'm sorry." He did not ask what happened. He did not sit down. He poured himself a glass of water and went to his study and closed the door. I stood in the kitchen. I was 20. My therapist, a careful woman named Dr. Reyes, asked me to describe my relationship with my father. I talked for 40 minutes. At the end she said, "It sounds like he was there and not there simultaneously." I said yes. She said, "Did he do that with everyone or specifically with you?" I had never thought about that question. I went home and thought about it. I came back the following week and said, "Specifically me." I think specifically me. She said, "That's interesting. Why do you think that is?" I said I didn't know. She said, "Has it ever occurred to you that it might not be about you at all?" I said no. She said, "Let that be a question you carry." I carried it. I carried it for 3 years, until the day my father died. Part 3. The diagnosis. My father was diagnosed with a heart condition when he was 55. Not a dramatic one, not immediately life-threatening, but serious in the way that requires management and attention and lifestyle adjustment, and the particular renegotiation with the future that a health diagnosis requires. He managed it quietly. He took his medication. He saw his cardiologist. He made the dietary adjustments. He did not talk about it much at home, which was consistent with how he handled most things. My mother knew the details. The rest of us knew the outline. What I remember about the 3 years between his diagnosis and his death is that he got quieter. Not different in kind. He had always been quiet, specifically quiet, but the quiet deepened. There were more evenings when the book pages did not turn. More mornings when he sat at the breakfast table with a coffee that went cold. More Sundays when he was in his study with the door not quite closed, and I would pass in the hallway and feel the specific pull of wanting to knock and not knocking, because I had knocked before and the response had always been a version of, "I'm fine, Simone. Thank you." I did not knock. I did not push. I told myself I was respecting his process. And I was also protecting myself from one more door that didn't quite open. He died on a Wednesday in February. His heart, which had been managed and monitored and carefully attended to, stopped in the morning while he was in his study. My mother found him. She called Bea first. Bea called me. I drove to my parents' house in a state that I can only describe as the absence of state, not numb, not hysterical, simply unregistered, as if the information had arrived but the body had not yet decided what to do with it. I walked into the house. My mother was on the couch with Bea beside her. The study door was open. I don't know why I went there. Something directed me. The body goes where it needs to go before the mind catches up. I went to my father's study. Part 4. The study. His desk was the way his desk always was. Ordered, precise, nothing left where it didn't belong. The cataloging instinct extended to his own space. A place for everything and everything accounted for. On the desk, in the center, placed with a deliberateness that I felt the moment I saw it, was a folder. Not filed away. Not in a drawer. On the desk, in the center. Where it would be found. It had my name on it. Just my name. Written in my father's handwriting, which was small and exact. The handwriting of a man who had spent 30 years handling documents that required precision. Simone. On the front of a manila folder, placed in the center of a desk that was otherwise in order, by a man who had ordered everything and left this one thing out. I picked it up. I stood in the study where my father had spent the quiet hours of 30 years. I opened the folder. Part 5. What was inside the folder contained 4 things. I am going to tell you what they were carefully because each one matters, and the order they were in matters, and the fact that he had assembled them into a folder and placed the folder on the desk where it would be found matters most of all. The first thing was a photograph, black and white. A woman I did not recognize, maybe 30 years old, standing in front of what appeared to be a library or archive, tall shelves, the serious light of a room where documents live. She was dark-haired and slight, and she was not looking at the camera. She was looking at something to the left of it with an expression of focused attention that I recognized. I recognized it because I had seen it on my own face in photographs, the particular quality of a person fully absorbed in what they are looking at. I turned the photograph over. On the back, in my father's handwriting, Margaret, 1987. The second thing was a letter, not written to me, written to my father by someone whose name at the bottom was Margaret Alcott, the same last name as my father, which meant this was not a woman he had known professionally or casually. Alcott was my father's family name. His people were from Ohio. I knew his parents had died before I was born and that he had no siblings. I knew the outline of a family and no more because my father did not discuss his family and my mother did not push, and I had not, until this moment, understood there was something to push toward. The letter was dated June 1993. I was born in April 1998. The letter was 5 years before I existed. It was 3 pages. I read it in the study standing up, and then I sat on my father's chair and read it again. Margaret was my father's sister. She had been 2 years older than him. She had also been an archivist. The photograph was from her workplace, a university library in another state. She had, from the letter's content, been estranged from my father for several years before it was written. The reason for the estrangement was not stated directly but was present in what surrounded it, references to a conversation they had not finished, to something my father had said that she could not forgive, to the specific damage of a wound between siblings that comes from a truth one of them refused to accept. She wrote, "Walt, I have been sick. I don't know yet how sick. I'm telling you because you are my brother and because I think if the situation were reversed, you would want to know. I am not asking you to fix anything between us. I am not asking for anything. I am telling you because you should know. I hope you are well. I hope Claire is well. I hope Blair is well. I hope when the time comes and you have children, that you are better at the telling than you have been with me." The letter ended there. No resolution, no response indicated. Just a woman who knew she was sick writing to her estranged brother because he was her brother. The third thing was a death notice, clipped from a newspaper. The date at the top was November 1993, 5 months after the letter. Margaret Alcott, 34 years old. She had been sick for a long time before the letter, the death notice suggested. The sickness had moved faster than she had told him it would. She died 5 years before I was born. The fourth thing was a single piece of notepaper, folded once with my name on the outside. Different from the folder. This was recent. The handwriting was the same, but slower, the handwriting of a man who had been managing a heart condition for 3 years and whose hands had changed accordingly. I unfolded it. He wrote, Simone. You have her face. From the day you were born, you had her face, and I have never known what to do with that. I have never known how to look at you without seeing her, and I have never known how to see her without feeling what I felt when I did not go to her and I could not undo it. I handled it wrongly. I handled it by not handling it. I understand what that cost you, and I am sorry in a way I do not have adequate language for. You deserved a father who could look at you. I was looking at you every moment. I was looking at too many things at once to let you see that I was looking. He wrote, she was remarkable. You are remarkable. I could see it in you from the beginning, and I could not say so without saying everything, and saying everything was beyond me. I am sorry it was beyond me. He wrote, at the bottom, in the smallest handwriting, the handwriting of a man at the end of what he had the strength to say. Her name was Margaret. She would have loved you. I believe she does, from wherever she is. I believe you have always had more people looking at you than you knew. I sat in my father's chair. The study was quiet in a specific way of a room that has held 30 years of a person, and is now without them. I held the notepaper. I thought about a 7-year-old girl asking her father who she looked like. You look like. And the shutter closing. A woman in a photograph looking to the left of the camera with focused attention. A letter that said I was looking at you every moment. I thought about pressing my hand against glass for 23 years and not knowing that on the other side he was pressing back. Part 6. What my mother knew about Margaret. She told me that evening after the calls were made and the immediate catastrophe of logistics had been attended to, and Bea had gone home and we were alone in the kitchen with tea. We were not drinking. She had known since before I was born. My father had told her about the estrangement, the letter, the death. He had told her before they had children in the way of people who are going to build a life together and need to tell the true things first. She had understood when I was born what happened to him when he looked at me. She had watched him struggle with it, and she had tried to create space around it, and she had not known how to fix it. And she had not told me, because my father had asked her not to, and because she had believed, truly, that he would find a way to tell me himself. She said, I thought he would get there. I thought he would find the words. I said, he found them. He just found them too late. She said, I should have pushed him harder. I said, Mom. She said, you deserve to know. You spent your whole childhood thinking something was wrong with you. I said, I know. She said, nothing was wrong with you. I said, I know that now. She reached across the table and put her hand over mine. She said, she would have been your aunt. Her name was Margaret. She was extraordinary. A pause. You are very like her. Not just the face. The way you focus on things. The way you read a room. Walt used to watch you do something, read or draw or listen to someone talk, and his face would do something I couldn't describe. Not sad exactly. Full. Too full. Like he was receiving something he didn't know what to do with. I said, he was. She said, yes. We sat in the kitchen. The tea went cold. Outside, February was doing what February does. Pressing down, gray and certain. The month that does not apologize for what it is. I thought about my father in his temperature-controlled room, handling things that were fragile and needed careful attention. I thought about what he had been handling all those years. What he had been trying, in his precise and insufficient way, to preserve. Part 7. What I did with the folder. Pause here with me. If you have ever found out that the wound you carried was not about you and felt both relief and grief at exactly the same moment, drop the word both in the comments. Because I need to know how many of us are sitting with both at once. Here is what I did not do. I did not become immediately healed. I did not arrive at a clean forgiveness on the night I read the letter. I did not reconstruct my childhood into a different story and feel fine. What I did was sit with the folder. I sat with it for weeks. I took out the photograph and looked at Margaret Alcott, looking at something to the left of the camera with my expression on her face. I read the letter she had written to my father. I read his letter to me. I did all of this in small installments, the way you process things that are too large to take in all at once. I went back to Dr. Reyes. I told her everything. She listened the way she always listened, with the quality of attention that makes you feel the room is built specifically for what you're saying. When I finished, she said, "How does it change things?" I said, "It doesn't change what happened. I still grew up feeling like the problem." She said, "No." I said, "But I understand why now." And understanding why doesn't undo the feeling, but it relocates it. It moves it out of me and into him. Into something that was his to carry that he couldn't carry and put down by accident onto me. She said, "That's precise." I said, "I'm an archivist's daughter." She said, "Yes, you are." Part 8. Margaret. I found her. Not in person. In the archive she had worked in. It was a university library, identifiable from the photograph, and her name was in their records because she had worked there for 6 years before she died, and the people who worked there knew her and remembered her, and when I reached out and explained who I was, what arrived in my email was more than I had expected. Colleagues who had known her wrote back. A woman named Ruth who had worked beside her for 4 years. A man named Gerald, who had been her supervisor and who was now retired and who wrote 3 paragraphs about what she had been like that I read on a Tuesday morning at my kitchen table and had to put my phone down for a few minutes before I could finish. She had been meticulous and funny. She had brought plants into the archive that weren't technically permitted, and nobody said anything because they were good plants, and she tended them carefully. She had a specific laugh that Ruth described as starting quiet and ending loud, which was the opposite of the way most people's laughs work. She had been passionate about her work in the way of people who understand that preservation is an act of love, that to take care of something fragile is to argue for its right to continue existing. She had been sick for longer than the letter had implied. She had told almost nobody. She had kept working until she couldn't. She had never married. She had not had children. She would have been my aunt. She would have been 60 now, maybe 61. She would have, by every account, been someone who looked at me and seen something. I think about that. I think about it more than I expected to. I have her photograph on my wall now. Not framed dramatically, tacked up beside my desk, the way you put something where you want to see it while you work. She is looking to the left of the camera. She is focused on something I can't see. I work in publishing. I acquire and edit nonfiction, history, biography, the documented lives of people who deserve to be remembered. I do not know when I decided this was what I wanted to do. I know now that it was not a coincidence. The archivist's daughter, the archivist's niece, preserving things. My father watched me work and saw too many things at once to show me what he was seeing. I can see it now. From his chair, where I sometimes sit when I go to my mother's house, which I do more now, with more purpose. I sit in his chair and I understand the view from it. A study where 30 years of quiet work happened. A daughter who came into the world with a dead sister's face and made him feel things he had not finished feeling. He loved me in a way that was entirely real and that he had not figured out how to make visible. I am spending the rest of my life making things visible. It turns out this was always what I was going to do. Epilogue: The Glass Summer. A Saturday. Early. My apartment, the photograph on the wall, the window that faces east. I am 26. 3 years since the archivist's office, the violin recital, the 14-year-old hallway. 3 years since I believed the problem was me. 10 months since the study, the folder, the notepaper. I called Bia last week. We talked for 2 hours about our father, which we do now with a regularity that would have seemed impossible a year ago. Bea had known less than I had known. She had not been the one who went to the study, had not been the one the folder was addressed to. She is working through her own version of the rearranging, which is different from mine but made of the same materials. She said, "Do you miss him differently now than you did right after?" I said, "Yes." She said, "How?" I thought about it. I said, "Before, I missed the father I thought I'd had, which wasn't quite real. Now I miss the one he actually was, which is more complicated and more specific and, honestly, harder to miss. Because the real version includes everything: the glass and what he was looking at through it, the folder on the desk, the handwriting getting smaller." I paused. He was a person with a whole interior that I never got to see. I miss that interior now. I didn't know to miss it before. Bia was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "He left you the folder." I said, "He left me the folder." She said, "That's not nothing." I said, "No, it's not nothing." He placed it in the center of the desk where it would be found. He addressed it to me by name. He assembled 4 things: a photograph, a letter, a death notice, a note, in the sequence that would tell the story in the right order. He was an archivist. He knew how to preserve things.